What if a billionaire known for his cold heart and iron walls opened his gate one snowy night and found a 6-year-old girl collapsed in the snow clutching newborn twins? No name, no ID, just one desperate whisper: "Don't let him take them." That's exactly what happened to Graham Sloan, a man who thought he'd seen everything until a child's silent plea cracked open his world. But saving her was only the beginning. Behind her bruises lay a truth darker than anyone imagined, and a race against time to stop a man who would do the unthinkable. What secrets did this little girl carry? Who was she running from? And could this stranger, this billionaire, be the family she never had? Stay with us, because what unfolds next is a story of courage, betrayal, and a redemption no one saw coming. One that might just change the way you see love and strangers forever. It was just past midnight when Graham Sloan heard the sound faint, desperate, barely cutting through the howling wind outside his estate. He stood at the window of Sloan Hill Manor, nestled in the snowy hills of Ashbridge, Montana, sipping a glass of bourbon as snowflakes spiraled violently in the storm. He was used to silence, preferred it even. Silence didn't ask questions. Silence didn't break hearts. But that night, silence was interrupted by a sound that didn't belong, a weak thud, like something had collapsed outside his front gate. Curiosity wasn't a trait Graham entertained often, but something in the air pulled him out of his cocoon of solitude. He slipped on a coat, grabbed a flashlight, and made his way through the snow-covered driveway. As the gate came into view, his breath caught. There, huddled in the snow like a crumpled doll, was a little girl, barefoot, barely conscious arms wrapped around a bundle of cloth. Her lips were blue, her hair frozen in icicles. Graham dropped to his knees, instincts overtaking logic. Hey, kid, can you hear me?" The girl's eyes fluttered open. In the dim beam of his flashlight, he saw she was holding 2 tiny infants, newborns, swaddled in threadbare blankets, their faces pale from cold. Her voice cracked like glass. "Don't let him take them." And then she collapsed. He didn't think. He acted. Within minutes, the manor's old doors burst open as Ruth Langdon, his longtime housekeeper, gasped in horror. Graham laid the children on the thick couch near the fireplace, while Ruth scrambled for warm towels, calling for help. The little girl, who couldn't be more than 6, was shaking uncontrollably. The newborns weren't crying. That terrified him more than anything. "They're freezing," Ruth whispered, her voice trembling. "Who would leave 3 children out there in this storm?" "They weren't left," Graham muttered, staring at the girls' torn clothes. "They were running." The paramedics arrived, took the infants to warm incubators in the local clinic, and stabilized the girl right there in his study. Graham watched, jaw clenched, as professionals tried to coax the girl awake. "Name," the EMT asked. She whispered, barely audible, "Tessa." "Marlowe." "And the babies?" Her eyes fluttered again. "Elodie and Finn. My brother and sister." The weight of it hit Graham like a brick wall. This wasn't just some runaway. This child had risked her life to protect 2 newborns in the middle of a blizzard. As the night dragged on, the hospital confirmed what he feared. If she'd been found an hour later, all 3 would have frozen to death. By morning, Jonas Merrick, Graham's attorney, arrived with steaming coffee and bad news. "There's no sign of parents," Jonas said, glancing through preliminary police reports. "But someone may have been following her." A man was spotted near the highway, dark coat, no license plate on his truck. Graham's fingers tightened around the coffee mug. Tessa remained curled up on the leather couch, wrapped in one of Ruth's quilts. When she finally opened her eyes again, she stared straight at Graham. "Are they safe?" she asked. "They're safe," he said quietly. "You all are." She didn't thank him. She just nodded, as if surviving another day was the only gratitude she could offer. That night, as the wind calmed and the storm passed, Graham stood at the door to the nursery. Yes, the same nursery that hadn't been touched since his brother died, the same one that still carried a faint scent of dust and memory. Elodie and Finn slept inside, monitored, carefully alive against all odds. He should have handed them over to the authorities. He should have gone back to his isolated life. But instead, something deeper stirred, something he hadn't felt in years. Responsibility, attachment, purpose, and fear that whoever that man was, he wasn't done searching. Graham Sloan, the reclusive billionaire, had just become the guardian of a mystery that could shatter everything he thought he'd locked away. The storm outside had passed, but the storm inside was just beginning. Thanks for watching. Sorry for the interruption. But we hope you will help us improve our content in the future. What do you think happened to Tessa's parents? Do you believe Graham is ready to protect these kids from whatever's coming? Let us know what country you're watching from. And if this story touched your heart, comment 100 below, and don't forget to share it with someone who loves emotional stories. For days, the manor remained strangely quiet. Not the usual kind of quiet that Graham Sloan was used to, but a thick, watchful silence, as if the walls themselves were waiting for something to happen. Tessa Marlowe had recovered enough to walk around the house in borrowed pajamas. She rarely spoke unless asked, always keeping one ear trained toward the window. Every time the wind shifted or a floorboard creaked, she'd flinch. But it was her eyes that haunted Graham the most, far too aware for a 6-year-old filled with questions she was too afraid to ask. One morning, Ruth handed Graham a folded piece of paper Tessa had left on the kitchen table. "It's a drawing," she whispered, "but I think it means something." Graham unfolded it slowly. What he saw made his blood run cold. It was a house scribbled in crayon. Not just any house, a red-roofed trailer next to a crooked tree and a rusted water tank. And in the background, drawn in angry black strokes, a man with a scar down his cheek stood holding a bag. The bag had tiny baby feet sticking out. Graham stared at the scar. "You've seen that man before?" he asked Tessa gently that evening, kneeling beside her. She nodded. "His name is Wade Harlan. He says he's my stepdad, but he's not nice. He locked Mommy in the bedroom." And then she stopped talking. She stopped moving. Graham's breath hitched. "He tried to take the babies," Tessa went on, voice flat. "Said he could sell them. For money." It was the way she said it, like it was the weather. Just facts, not horror. Graham stood and called Jonas immediately. "I want everything he said. Wade Harlan, where he lives, who he's tied to. Run it fast and quiet." Jonas's voice dropped. "You're saying child trafficking." "I'm saying," Graham growled. "We have 3 kids in this house that someone wants back badly, and I want to know why." That night, cameras around the estate caught something chilling. A dark pickup truck, headlights off, slowly rolling past the end of the long drive, stopping for 20 seconds, then pulling away into the darkness. The footage shook Ruth to the core. "He's watching us." "No," Graham said, jaw clenched. "He's testing us, seeing how close he can get." The next morning, Jonas arrived with news in a file that explained more than anyone wanted to hear. Wade Harlan had a record sealed in another state, former meth charges, alleged abuse. But what caught Graham's eye was a recent police report from a neighboring town filed by a woman named Annalise Marlowe, Tessa's mother. She tried to report him 2 months ago, Jonas said, claimed he was threatening her and planning to sell her babies when they were born. And the cops, Graham asked, dismissed it, no proof. She disappeared 2 weeks later. Tessa had been telling the truth all along. Graham stared at the fire fist tightening. "This isn't just about keeping them safe anymore," he said. "This man has to be stopped." That night he sat beside Tessa's bed. She was curled up beneath thick blankets, the twins asleep in the next room. "Hey, Tess," he said softly, "if you ever want to tell me where that trailer is, I can help." She blinked at him. "You'd go there, if it means finding your mom and making sure Wade never hurts anyone again?" "Yeah, I would." There was a long pause. Then she nodded. "There's a broken church sign near it. It says Grace something, and there's always one big blue truck with no tires, the kind you can't miss." Graham stood, already pulling on his coat. Jonas met him in the hallway. "You're going tomorrow morning, first light. You think that's wise?" "No," Graham said, his voice steady. "But it's right." He didn't know what he'd find. He didn't know if Tessa's mom was even alive. But one thing had become painfully clear. That man was never supposed to find these children. And now Graham was all that stood between them and the monster with the scar. He would no longer be a bystander. He would become the storm. Thanks for watching. Sorry for the interruption, but we hope you will help us improve our content in the future. Do you think Graham should confront Wade Harlan himself, or wait for the police? What would you do to protect those kids? Tell us where you're watching from. If this story has your heart racing, drop a 100 in the comments, hit like and share it with a friend who believes in standing up for what's right. The sun had barely risen when Graham Sloan pulled out of the long driveway of his Ashbridge estate, a quiet fire burning in his chest. He wasn't sure what drove him harder, the memory of Tessa's haunted eyes or the rage he'd been trying to bury for years. Either way, today wasn't about business or headlines. Today was about doing the one thing he'd never done before: fight for someone else. With Jonas Merrick riding shotgun and a loaded file of Wade Harlan's whereabouts, they traced an old map of abandoned lots along the outskirts of Elkridge County, Montana. After 2 hours of driving through pine forests and winding dirt roads, they found it. A rusted-out blue truck missing its front tires. Just beyond it, a crooked tree, and a small red-roofed trailer. It was exactly like Tessa's drawing. Graham cut the engine. "No police yet," he said. "We don't know what's inside." Jonas hesitated. "What if he's got her? What if she's already?" "We check first," Graham said. "Then we call it in." The trailer was quiet, eerily so. The wooden steps creaked under Graham's boots as he approached. He knocked once. No answer. Then from inside, a faint sound. A cough. A woman's voice, hoarse and cracked. "Help!" He didn't wait. One kick and the door flew open. The smell hit first mold decay, something rotting. Then the sight, Annalise Marlowe, thin bruised wrists, zip-tied to the bed frame. Her eyes widened as Graham rushed to her side. "He's not here," she rasped. "He left yesterday, said he was coming for the babies." Jonas cut the ties while Graham wrapped her in a blanket from the couch. "I thought I'd never see them again," she cried. "I thought they were all ready." "They're safe," Graham said softly. "Tessa saved them. She saved all three of you." But just as they stepped outside, gravel crunched behind them. The sound of a truck engine, a different one, roared closer. A black pickup barreled around the bend. Wade Harlan. He wasn't expecting company. Graham stepped forward without hesitation. "Don't even think about it, Wade." But Wade was already out of the truck, stumbling forward, eyes wild. "You rich bastard don't know what you're stealing." "You were going to sell babies," Jonas growled. "You don't get to talk about stealing." Wade reached behind his coat. For a second, Graham's heart stopped. But then sirens. 2 police cruisers burst from the road behind Wade's truck, lights flashing. Ruth had called them. Guns were drawn. Wade froze. And just like that, the storm that had haunted Tessa's life ended with the clang of steel cuffs. 3 weeks later, the trial began. The charges, kidnapping, assault, child endangerment, and attempted trafficking, piled high. But the most powerful testimony came not from lawyers, but from Tessa herself. Standing in her oversized cardigan in the courtroom, she pointed at Wade with trembling fingers and said, "He said no one would believe me, but someone did." Graham sat in the back row, hand resting protectively on Elodie's stroller, Finn asleep on his chest. Tessa didn't look back to him. She didn't need to. She knew. He had believed her when no one else did. That night, as the sky turned pink over Ashbridge and the fireplace glowed inside Sloan Hill Manor, Graham stood in the nursery again. Only this time, the walls had life cribs, mobiles, lullabies, laughter, and a family. Annalise had recovered faster than anyone expected. The doctors said it was the will to see her children. Graham suspected it was also the will to finally live free. Over dinner, Ruth placed a cake on the table, 3 candles for the twins and 1 for Tessa. "Happy new beginnings," she said. As they sang, Tessa leaned over to Graham and whispered, "You don't have to be alone anymore." He smiled at her, eyes stinging. "Neither do you." In the months that followed, things slowly changed. Tessa returned to school and drew more pictures, only now they had trees and birds and smiling suns. No more scars, no more shadows. Annalise took a job in Ashbridge's community center, speaking to other women at risk. She became a quiet symbol of survival. And Graham Sloan, the once lonely billionaire, found his house filled with giggles, chaos, and baby formula on his suits. But he never minded, not once. Because sometimes the family you choose finds you when you least expect it. And sometimes the coldest nights bring the warmest dawns. Thanks for watching. Sorry for the interruption, but we hope you will help us improve our content in the future. What do you think of this story? Did it move you? If so, drop a like and comment 100 below. Tell us where you're watching from. And don't forget to share this story with someone who believes in second chances and the power of kindness. A year had passed since the trial, but the memory of that winter still lingered in every corner of Sloan Hill Manor. The estate was no longer quiet and cold. It echoed with laughter, spilled juice, and late-night lullabies. The garden bloomed where it used to freeze. The nursery had hand-painted murals now drawn by Tessa, who had started calling herself big sister to the twins Elodie and Finn. Graham had changed in ways he never imagined. The boardroom no longer excited him the way Tessa's bedtime drawings did. He still wore tailored suits, but now with tiny fingerprints on the lapels and baby socks in his briefcase. He hadn't expected to become a father figure. He hadn't expected to feel this alive. Annalise found her footing too. With the help of Jonas, she filed for legal custody again, and this time as a free woman. She began working part-time at a local women's shelter where she told her story not as a victim, but as a survivor. She spoke softly but powerfully. Some nights she still cried, but never alone. One rainy evening, Tessa stood by the window, her sketchpad on the sill. "Do you think bad people come back?" she asked Graham quietly. He crouched beside her, brushing her curls aside. "Sometimes they do," he said honestly. "But now you're never alone, and if they ever try, they'll have to go through me." She nodded satisfied and flipped the page. She was drawing something new, a house by a lake with 5 people on the porch. One of them had a stroller, one had a guitar, one was her. That night, Graham looked out at the rain and wondered, was this it? Had they truly found peace? But he didn't know. That far away in another county, a man with a limp and a grudge had just been released on parole, and he hadn't forgotten the girl or the billionaire.